I'm back for another fun video, and this one of course includes bees. I just love honeybees and what they mean to our earth, so of course I continue to come up with bee patterns and it's so much fun. This is a fingerless mitten. It's great for still being able to type on your computer. That's why I love them. So if you get a little bit of a chill, you can throw on this fingerless mitten and you can still have your fingers to type away. So this is the left hand mitten. In this video, I'm going to cover the steps to the right hand mitten, but they are so similar. So let's go ahead and talk about the supplies. So for this pattern, of course, you will need a crochet hook. This is the size F. This is the Furls Alpha series. I love the strength of this one. I will link it in the pattern. It's a great hook to do color work with. It's really comfortable. You'll also need a yarn needle, a stitch marker. Since we're working in rounds continuously, it's really important to have a stitch marker for this pattern, some scissors, and then of course your yarn. This is twill fingering. This is from We Crochet. It has become one of my favorite fingering weights for color work. I've used it for some other mittens. I absolutely love the way it works up, especially because it is a 100% Superwash Merino wool. Nice in case it accidentally gets washed. It is 183 yards for every 50 grams. For this pattern, we're going to be using two colors. We are going to be using the Serpent Heather and the Granite Heather, or it's graphite. I'm so sorry I don't have my thing up. It's either granite or graphite. I get a little confused. Graphite. I just checked my computer. This is graphite and this is Serpent Heather. These are fabulous colors for this bee, but you can always substitute in different colors if you prefer. So let's go ahead and grab our hooks and get started. So for this mitten, it's going to be worked from bottom up, and we're going to be starting at this section. The cuff will come back and work later, so that we don't start with the cuff for this one. We're going to go ahead and start with this section, starting with the Serpent Heather. You're going to go ahead and we're going to chain 48 stitches. If you prefer, you can do a foundation single crochet for this one. But for me, for some reason, for these mittens, I like to chain 48 and then we're going to join. So you don't want to get any twists in this. Now, once you have chained 48 stitches, we're going to go ahead and single crochet into every stitch around. I just want to note that this is the only round for the color work portion that we will be working a single crochet, other than when we chain for the thumb, we'll be doing one more row there, but round. But when we come back and we work the next round into this, all the stitches after this round will be worked in a split single crochet. And split single crochets, for some just starting out doing it, can feel a bit fickly. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a tip that will help you now for the next round. When you work into the stitch and you yarn over and you pull up a loop, before completing the stitch, pull this second loop on the hook up to be the same height. Give it some space. What that does is it gives more space to the V on the front of the stitch, so that when we work into it for a split single crochet, it's very comfortable. You shouldn't be fighting the split single crochets. They should be worked up quite easily. So go ahead and single crochet this very first round of 48 stitches. Now I've single crocheted around for 48 and I'm ready to change colors and do another solid round of color in this darker graphite. So before I finish the very last stitch in the round, since I know I need to change colors, I will yarn over and finish this last stitch with my new color, and then I'm set up and ready to go. Now this next round will all be worked in split single crochet, and you'll notice you'll have kind of a jog going on here between rounds because we're working continuous, but don't worry because the ribbing hides that really well later on. So I'm going to work my very first stitch in this round as a split single crochet, and you can go ahead and mark that stitch if you would like. And then we're just going to continue to work every stitch in this round in our color B in a split single crochet for 48 stitches around. Now that I've finished with round 2, it's time to start getting into more of that color work going on here. So for round 3, I'm going to be starting my round with my color A for 2 stitches. So I'm finishing the last stitch of round 2 with my new color, and then I'm going to work the first 2 stitches of the next round in my color A. But this is where it gets really critical to mark the first stitch of your round, it can be really easy to get lost in this if you don't. It just makes it a lot more relaxing if you just go ahead and use your stitch marker. And now my next stitch in this round will be also the color A, and then I'm going to switch to the color B for 2. Now this entire round will simply repeat that. It will be 2 of color A and then 2 of color B. Now there are 3 ways to work this color work in this pattern. You can go by the written pattern that each stitch is written out for you, or you can go by a colorwork chart or a block chart. I want to talk about the last 2. Let's take a look at the colorwork chart. So this is part of our colorwork chart. We're looking at the bottom right of it here, and we have finished round 1 and round 2, but this chart is always worked from right to left, and all of the stitches are shown on this chart for this fingerless mitten. So when we finish round 3, when we come back for round 4, we will still be working from right to left for every single round. Following each block is 1 stitch. Now let's go ahead and talk about the color blocks. So this is our color block chart. It might be a little bit different from what you've seen in the past. This is a new feature. I really like it. But for row 1 and well, this should say round. I don't know why it says rows. But for round 1 and round 2, there are 48 stitches. And so if you look at round 3, you're doing 2 stitches per color and alternating that. So what it's showing us is how to work each round and how many stitches of that color. So if you see a 1 on this black, then that would mean you do 1 stitch in that black. Then if you see 2 on the yellow, you're going to do 2 stitches in your color that looks like yellow. This is also a fun visual way to work the color work. That way you don't always have to go back to the written instructions. It really depends on what you're most comfortable with. I like to give options, so whether you like the written pattern, the chart, or the color block, you have something to choose from. So I'm going to continue to work around and around, not joining. This is completely continuous until I get to the thumb area. So that's round 24. So work through round 23 and then come on back. But there's just simply one more thing I want to note is in this pattern, we don't really get to it until this section, but if you're ever working more than 3 stitches, we don't want a really long float on the back. To make this a bit more of a flexible fabric, I'm not working over the yarn that's not being used. I'm floating it on the back. So if I were to have lots and lots of stitches, that would be in a different color. So if I say I was doing a section where I was doing quite a few stitches of the same color, let me show you, for example, what I would do. I wouldn't go more than 3 stitches before I catch the yarn on the back. So I'm going to catch that float. So I'm going to show you how you do that. You take the yarn that you want to catch and you lay it over your hook, and then you go ahead and you work that stitch. And what that does on the back is it traps that yarn so that your float isn't extremely long. We don't want our floats to be very long because as we put our fingers into this mitten, we don't want it to catch on much. So I'm going to show you the inside of this here. These are my floats, and notice I don't go more than 3 stitches before I catch the yarn if I need to, and that way it stays a lot cleaner on the back side and you don't get your fingers stuck into these floats on the back, but the fabric remains less stiff. If you were to work over the yarn that you're not using every single time, it may make this a bit stiffer and possibly change the gauge. So that's how I like to work my yarn, by floating it on the back. So work in the color work up to through round 23, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about that thumb hole. Now that we're back to the thumb hole, we start this round by doing 1 split single crochet in our black yarn, and then we're going to chain 11 stitches. Now you can do a foundation single crochet here if you prefer, but a chain works just as well. And then once we've chained 11, I'm sure you can guess what happens next, because we need to be making a spot for our thumb. So we are going to be skipping the next 11 stitches and then starting the stitch right after those 11 stitches. Now the stitch that happens right after these 11 stitches is still in the same color I have on my hook. So I'll simply work that next color, making sure that I'm staying in the pattern and I'm entering right where I need to. And then we won't want to carry our other yarn across this opening. It's just not a great idea. So we're going to fasten it off and then reattach. The nice thing is though, is you can use those tail ends if you need to sew any spots that might be a bit of a gap at the beginning of the thumb. So now I'm just going to continue the rest of this round. I'm simply going to add the next color that I need. And that way I'm ready to work back into that color pattern all the way around and then come on back and I'm going to show you how to work over those chain stitches. Now that I'm back around, it's time for me to start this round by doing 1 split single crochet, and then we're working across all of these chain stitches. Now we're going to be working these as single crochets, but giving them enough room on the next round that we'll work into them as split single crochets. So you're still working in the colorwork pattern, but just simply work these in single crochet stitches across this chain. And then when we come back again, then we can work in those split single crochet patterns. So I'm going to finish up across this chain, and then I'm going to continue working this round just as we have been doing. And this color work, as you can see, is working out quite nicely. Sometimes it's hard to get into those chains. Just take your time, make sure that you're getting the right colors and the right stitches across it, and the next round will feel easier. And just like that, we've got a beautiful thumb hole spot. We will come back later to work that ribbing around the thumb, but from here till we work the top ribbing, go ahead and just simply do all that beautiful color work in the round and enjoy watching this work up. Now that we have this body color work done, it's time for us to do the top fingerless ribbing. To do that, we will want to start this by slip stitching into the very next stitch. What that does is you notice the height of our last single crochet obviously is higher than the previous round because we are working continuously. So by doing this, it will even that out just a little bit. Now we're going to start our ribbing. We're going to start by chaining 4. And the last chain I kind of like to tighten down on. This will be the only time I do a turning chain. After this, we will not. So I am going to start in the second chain from the hook, and I'm going to single crochet, and then I'm going to single crochet into the next 2 chains. Now we're going to slip stitch in the next 2 stitches, just a normal slip stitch. We don't need to do any split stitch style. So I slip stitched 2 stitches, and now I'm going to turn, and we are going to skip the 2 slip stitches we just did on the body, and in the back loop only we will single crochet across those 3 stitches. Now we're going to turn, and we don't need to chain 1. The chain 1 really just adds extra bulk and it's not necessary. So we're going to turn and working in the back loops only. So we'll always be working these 3 single crochets in the back loop only. We are going to single crochet 3. Then once again, we will slip stitch 2 from the body edge. Turn, skip those 2 slip stitches, and in the back loop only, single crochet 3. And we're just going to keep repeating those 2 rows all the way around until we have come back to the beginning, where I will show you how to join your starting edge with your finishing edge. Now that we worked this ribbing all the way around, it's time to join our finishing edge with our starting edge. And here's how we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to start by working into this first stitch from the hook, and I'm going to enter the back loop only just like we've been doing. But I'm also going to grab the first loop over here on this side, and that way I'm working through the back loop of the current row and grabbing a loop from the first row, and then I'm going to yarn over and slip stitch. And I'm going to do that for the remaining 2 stitches. I'm going to go through the back loop of my current row, into the loop of my first row, yarn over, pull through all those loops, and slip stitch.
And this does a nice join that you really can't see, especially, I mean, if you're using a darker color yarn like I am. But you'll just slip stitch those 3 together, fasten off your yarn, and then you're good to go with that nice ribbing. Now we're going to talk about the thumb and the cuff. We'll be using the exact same style of ribbing. Now for the ribbing on the thumb, we're going to go ahead and attach our yarn to the first stitch. It really doesn't matter where you start. You can just pick a stitch. I like to do it on the corners because I'll use my tail end to weave in any holes this might create when we're working around. There might be a bit of a gap on the right and the left side of the mitten, and you can use your tail end to weave that in. So I'm going to attach with a slip stitch. I'm going to pull my tail end inside the mitten and out of my way. Now I'm going to chain 3. And then for this first row, we will do a turning chain. This will be the only row we do so. Now we will single crochet in the second chain from the hook and in the next 2. And this is worked exactly the same way as this top ribbing, and we're just doing it around the thumb opening. And now I will slip stitch in the next 2 stitches. And just like this top ribbing, I'll turn, skip the 2 slip stitches, and in the back loop only single crochet 3. So we're going to be working this all the way around every stitch of this mitten. Once you get to this corner, you'll work through this stitch, and then you'll simply start working the stitches on the top here all the way around. And then when you get all the way around, you will simply join the exact same way as we did here. So you're just repeating this step around the opening for the thumb. Now that we have our thumb done, it's time for us to come back in and do the very last steps, which is the cuff. It is done the exact same way as the thumb and this top ribbing. It's just using a few more stitches to make it a little bit longer. So we're going to go ahead and attach our yarn, and I like to do so on one of the sides just to kind of hide any seam that might appear. And for this one, excuse me, we are going to chain 8. This means we will have 7 stitches running across here, and the first one is our turning chain, but this is the only row we're going to use a turning chain. So in the second chain from the hook, we will do a single crochet, and then we'll single crochet into the next 6 stitches. And then this part is worked the exact same as the thumb and the top cuff, where you're going to work in rows. We're just working more stitches. We're working 7 stitches instead of 3. You'll work that all the way around and then join in the exact same way as we did with this top ribbing. And then when you're done, you have some awesome fingerless mittens. I adore these. Once I weave in my ends, of course. I adore these mittens just simply because of the bee. I definitely am a huge bee fan. And it's nice because I can keep my hands warm in my office when it's a bit cold, but I can still do what I need to do. I can crochet with these, I can type, and I love that about fingerless mittens. I really hope you've enjoyed this project and you come back soon for more. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss anything, and I can't wait to see you for our next project.